Hey guys, welcome to episode 7 of the Voiceover Roadmap podcast. On today's show, we have a guest co-host, John Melley. John is a voiceover talent, as well as the production director for Boston's Mix 104.1, and John also has his own podcast, the Voiceover Marketing Podcast. On this episode, John and myself talk a bit about voiceover marketing, different ways to do so, different kinds of people and prospects, and how to market yourself to different prospects and to clients, and all the different scenarios that go along with voiceover marketing. And we also answered your performance, audio, and business questions for this week. And just a reminder, if you'd like to submit a question for a future episode of the show, you can do that at voiceoverroadmap.com/questions. And if you want to check out the show notes for this episode, you can do that at voiceoverroadmap.com/007. And you can check out the show on iTunes, on YouTube, or right on the voiceoverroadmap.com website. And if you like the show and could leave a review and a rating on iTunes, that would be great as well. So let's jump into episode 7 with guest co-host John Melley. Hey, John, how's it going?
Great, Michael. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Hey, very welcome. Thank you for having me and asking me to be on your show. Congratulations on your podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Before we jump into our questions for this episode, I'd like to just introduce you a little bit to the audience and talk about your history in voiceover and how you got started. So can you bring us back to how you very first got started in voiceover and how your career really started moving forward?
I like to say that it is hours and hours of misspent youth finally paying off, Michael. I was always a kid who was doing imitations of the teachers and recapping Saturday Night Live and Monday Morning Homeroom. I wasn't the class clown. I didn't get in a lot of trouble, but I was that person that got known for doing imitations and voices and sound effects. And so I decided I wanted to be a radio guy. I had family members in radio. Both my great uncle on my mother's side played the organ for the old Yankee radio network years and years ago. And I also had another cousin on my father's side who was a newscaster on an AM radio station back in the 70s when they were playing rock and roll music back in the 70s before FM really took off. So the possibility of radio was pretty real for me because I knew of or had heard of family members who had done it before. So I went into college with an eye to getting into communications because I thought that's what you needed to do to get into radio broadcasting. And I went to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and they said, communications is full. You will be a history major. And being the good firstborn son that I am and doing what I was told, I went, oh, okay, and was a history major. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? And so I was talking with somebody in my dorm, and this was back in the 80s. I'm dating myself, but I graduated college from UMass in Amherst in 1989 and with a degree in political science. Because somebody said, history, you might want something a little more hands-on. You should try political science. And I said, you can change your major? And they said, yes. And so I jumped into political science. I loved it. I learned an awful lot. I'm a big history buff. So even though I didn't want to be a history major, I still love history, American history in particular, Revolutionary War era history. So I did that. And I should back up a second, Michael, and say that to pay for college, I was a meat cutter. And
okay.
I made hamburger. I cut up chickens. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And this has a purpose, I'm telling you. And so there's a reason I'm sharing this with you. And so I graduated from college. I went to work for my parents who had a retail stationery office supply greeting card shop. We did a lot of social printing. And I wound up working on some political campaigns. I'd left my family business for a time and wound up working in the Massachusetts legislature and as a research analyst. And my first boss in the Massachusetts State House said to me, John, if you like laws and you like sausage, you'd hate to see how we make both. And having made sausage, being a meat cutter.
Yeah, right.
And having witnessed the legislative process, she was right. It ain't pretty, but it does work. And I know people are really, I'm not going to get political, but people are really frustrated now but it's intended to be frustrating. It's not supposed to be one side gets their way all the time. Hopefully, at some point down the road, we can come back to that idea of achieving consensus where everybody kind of walks away, yeah, okay, I think we can live with that. But who knows? Only time will tell. But moving on from that, I really met some interesting people. I've met presidents. I've met governors, mayors, all kinds of really fascinating people. And but I really had this whole thing of, hey, this really isn't for me. There's no closure. You get through one law, it would become law and get passed, and then they'd make up regulations for it. And I got hired away by a trade association. I became a lobbyist for the Massachusetts Association of Realtors in the mid-'90s. And all of this was going on while I was going to broadcasting school at night, because I was saying, this is great, but remember that dream you had about getting into radio? What happened? Mm-hmm. So I went to broadcasting school at night, and then I had a production teacher, Dick Durante, who just passed away this year, was my mentor, and very, very creative man. He took me under his wing. He heard some of the stuff I was doing, and he really liked it, and I started board hopping at the radio station that he was the production director for, and then it became a part-time position. Then it became a part-time copywriting position, and then in the late 90s, I got signed into AFTRA, SAG-AFTRA, and then I jumped from, I was at Oldies 103, which was a top 10 radio station in Boston in the market, and then I transferred over to Mix 104.1, and I've been with Mix since 2001, and been growing my freelance business and producing commercials for them for about 17 years now.
Wow, awesome. So were you one of those people who maybe had some troubles shedding that radio voice for jobs that need you to be conversational? I know a lot of people come from radio backgrounds, and that's kind of like a common thing that I think comes up sometimes. Was that ever an issue for you?
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I others could say yes, but it hasn't been a problem for me. I've never been a DJ. That's actually something. Yeah, that's something that I forgot to mention, is that when I went to broadcasting school at night, I bought a microphone. This was a step back for a second. I knew I wanted to do something, so I went to Radio Shack and bought a microphone and some cables and plugged it into my tape deck at home, and I just started babbling. I said, but I realized within minutes, literally, I don't have any structure. I don't have any kind of a format. I need something to kind of guide me through this thing. I can't just wing this and just, like I'd be in a brown paper bag trying to fight my way out. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I knew I needed to find some structure and an outlet and something that could guide me through it. So that's why I went to broadcasting school. And when I went there, I thought I wanted to be a DJ. But then when I found out what DJs do, or more importantly to me, what they didn't do, I was frustrated because I was thinking, oh gosh, this isn't what I expected. Is this for me? And it wasn't until I took radio production where I finally said, aha, this is for me. Because in production, I can write, I can edit, I can voice, I can select the music, I can collect all the sound effects that are necessary. I can perform the different voices that I want to perform. So I've always positioned myself as a voice talent that works at a radio station primarily. I'm on contract, so I'm a contract employee with them. So the radio station and CBS is my biggest client. That's the way I position myself. Right. And so in terms of the radio voice, hey, everybody, it's 10 minutes past the big hour of 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. No, I can do it, but I don't want to. Sure. Unless I have to. But yeah, if they ask you for it, sure. Right. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, so I know that you are the host of the Voiceover Marketing Podcast, which we'll talk about for sure in a little bit. But I have a few of my own sort of voiceover marketing questions for you before we jump into our audience questions. So my first one would be,
There's a lot of different ways to market yourself as a voiceover talent, and I've always been a big proponent of, trial and error and seeing what works for you and what doesn't work, and then putting more time and energy into the things that are getting you results. So have you found a certain 1, 2, or maybe more specific methods of marketing that have been most successful for you? Be it, emailing, cold calling, direct mail, networking in person, just any of them.
Sure. That's a great question. And all of those are valid ways of marketing yourself. Though the stuff that's worked for me the best, it has been in-person networking.
Interesting.
Yeah. I have approached marketing differently from a lot of people. I like to be places where no one else is. And I've talked about that before. It's one of the tenets of my podcast itself is, there's been a lot of talk or discussion and coverage of the pay-to-play sites lately in our industry. And the problem with the pay-to-play sites, and I'm not going to single out any one in particular, it's just the problem I have with that. And I've gotten clients from them, from the big ones that people know. And so they work. The problem with those sites is that you're a commodity. And you are there with literally thousands of people who have voices. And if you want to cut that number in half based on your gender, if they're looking for a male or a female, you're still among thousands of people that can, provide that service. So I like to be where other people aren't. And so I have shown up and marketed my voiceover services to people in areas where nobody else is marketing voiceover services. So I have no competition. And then it becomes the referral game. And sometimes I get an endorsed mailing from a thought leader in a particular industry, and I just drill down. And so in the areas that I've focused on, I have no competition and I own it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I actually myself have not done a lot of in-person networking, so I'm interested in that. What kind of, do you go to conferences? Is it more just speaking with business owners one-on-one? What kind of things do you go to or put yourself in to do that kind of marketing?
I go to conferences and I aim for, and I haven't done so much recently. I used to travel an awful lot for that and do different trade shows.
Right.
I've cut back on it quite a bit in the last few years, just because, and this dovetails into other things and other areas of voiceover and parts of my life that I've made conscious decisions to make changes to. I was traveling a lot, working hard, and I started to develop some health issues maybe 6-7 years ago, and didn't like the direction I was going in, and so I focused more on working locally and marketing locally and working with a network, but also working on taking care of myself. And I've done some webinars on a new thing that I'm doing about the voiceover athlete. We can talk about that if you'd like later on.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if my tagline for that is a healthy body means a healthy voice. And if we don't...
Yeah, I agree.
if we don't take care of ourselves, it doesn't matter how hard we work. Doesn't matter. Michael, I don't say this to brag, but there was one year where I made more money than I ever made in my life. I was working full-time at CBS, and I was making over 6 figures in my freelance business. And it takes a toll. And that was awesome until I had to pay for the ambulance ride and all that kind of stuff. So,
wow.
And thankfully I'm healthy. It was just, what it was I had a couple of kidney stones, but I was working till 4:00 in the morning, getting up, putting a Post-it note on the bathroom mirror for my wife to say, okay, set the alarm for 9:00. She'd set the alarm for 9:00. I'd grab a cup of coffee out the door, lather, rinse, repeat, come home and edit, and I was doing that for months. And I made a ton of money, but,
catches up to you. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. You can't do it. And I turned 50 this year, and I'm in better shape now than I was at 40. And I'm not doing that again. So I work hard, but I also really try and balance that with rest. And that's one of the reasons why I've cut back a lot on my travel.
Sounds like the smart move.
You got an answer you didn't expect.
Yeah.
Everybody does it. Everybody's going to run into it eventually. I see it all the time. And it's one of those things where you sit there and you go, you you'd better slow down. You're gonna, one way or another. You're going to make the decision to slow down, or your body will decide for you.
Exactly. Yeah. You can keep it up for a little bit, but I think everyone, that the time span might be different for different people, but I think it's going to catch up with everyone at some point or another if you kind of keep that going.
Yeah, man.
But so at some of these like conferences and stuff, would you like hand out a business card to people? Because voiceover, it's an audio thing, so you kind of want people to hear you. So I'm assuming you're not going around with a tape recorder and playing your demo for people on headphones or something. Are you just sort of talking to people, saying hi, giving them a business card, that kind of thing?
No.
Oh, okay. So what are you doing?
What am I doing? I've created products and services using my voice over talent and my production skills. And I would have an exhibit booth at a conference, and I would have flyers, and I would have audio CDs, and I would say, you need one of these.
That's great. Yeah, because if they could hear you, I mean, that's a huge thing for this, obviously. I mean, voiceover, like I said, it's an audio thing, so. Yeah. Okay, cool. Very cool. Good to know. So a lot of the time, people sort of get confused and have questions with a follow-up plan. It's you can kind of understand, okay, I got to market myself, I got to email, cold call, whatever it is, I got to get in front of people. But then beyond that, that's not the end of it. They still got to follow up with people and sort of stay on their radar and stuff. So what's something that you might recommend for somebody who has reached out, be it an email, cold call, whatever, and gotten a response? So the client came back and said, hey man, yeah, it looks good, your demo sound good, website sounds good, whatever it is. And then they haven't hired you and you haven't heard from them for weeks, months, years, maybe. What are some ways that you might follow up with somebody in a situation like that?
Well, the first thing I would do is ask if it's okay for you to follow up with them. Mm-hmm. I have this going on right now with a couple of prospects, and I've got somebody who's interested in purchasing some services from me. And, the range of reasons why they're holding off probably has nothing to do with you, It could be that they're moving. It could be that they have personnel changes, or whomever they were thinking of using this service for suddenly doesn't need it anymore. So I think a lot of people in voiceover take it personally, and I've done so myself, when they say, yeah, no, not now, and It ain't about you most of the time. It's about what their timetable is. But, what I said to this person who actually said, we're thinking about changing it up, my first question to them was, well, is it okay if I follow up with you in a couple of weeks? 95% of the time, they're going to say, yeah, that's fine. And so one of the episodes of my podcast, I actually talked about this. We did a whole episode on using Evernote. I don't know if you're familiar with Evernote.
Yeah,
Michael.
I love Evernote. Yep.
Yeah. And so I set up reminders for myself, like, okay, 2 weeks, email Keith, follow up with Rachel, that kind of thing. And it just pops up. I can even select the time that I want to do it. And then there are other things that I've done that have automated things, so that, once a week people get something. If they're on my email list for the podcast, they get, pinged with, hey, if you haven't listened to this episode, here's why you should. And then, go check that out and all that kind of good stuff. So I always ask, I think they call that permission-based marketing for whatever reason. But I like to ask, and rarely does anybody say no to me. And I just follow up with them and keep on keeping on. I won't, over time, I might back it off a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I always keep a list of people and leads that have expressed an interest. Right.
So they're good. They go on some sort of a mailing list, and you'll touch base here and there, whatever the interval is, just to kind of, you want them to remember you, basically, is the idea, I guess, right?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. And so, marketing is, I think, generally thought of in terms of marketing yourself to prospects and people that you haven't worked with yet and trying to get new work. But sort of in line with what we were just talking about, I think it's also important to continue to market yourself to your existing clients, so that even if it's somebody who you haven't worked with for months or a year or multiple years, they don't forget about you, and you can stay on their radar, and they can, if they have a project coming up that you might be a good fit for, they can reach out to you, get an audition, talk to you about it. Do you have any specific tips or strategies on ways that you would market yourself to an existing client, somebody that you have already worked with?
Yeah, sure. And I used to be I'm going to be perfectly candid with you. I used to be a lot better about this than I am currently. Mm-hmm. But one of the most effective things that people can do is give them a newsletter. And people are like, I don't want to do a newsletter. and I understand it because it takes work. But the idea behind a newsletter, and I should really take my own advice because it's been a bit since I published mine, but it works. And people are bored, so people want to be entertained. And I'm not talking about an email newsletter. I'm talking about a hard paper and ink newsletter.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That you mail. Because nobody gets mail anymore. They only get bills. They get junk mail, so to speak. But if you send somebody a newsletter in an envelope with their name on it and it's entertaining, then it's something tangible and they're going to share it with people. The thing is that a lot of people go, well, I don't know what I'd write about and I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't make that voice. But that's what I do. So here I go.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I can't just make a newsletter up about voiceover. How long's that going to be? Won't that be boring? Yes, it will be. And no, it doesn't have to be about voiceover. It can be about you, what's going on in your world, client of the month kind of a thing, trivia, word searches, all kinds of fun stuff. Just make it entertaining because, like I said, people are bored and companies don't buy. People in companies make buying decisions. So
yeah, and that's memorable. I mean, that'll make you stand out from 20 marketing emails or email newsletters that they get. Doing something like that. That goes well with your theme of being where people aren't, like networking and doing in a print newsletter. Those are things that I would probably assume a lot of talent don't really take advantage of and don't try. And I like that. I like that idea of just stepping outside the box a little bit and doing things that people don't necessarily do all the time to sort of stand out and be memorable. And it's great.
Yeah, and I don't want to bring on a ton of competition, but I don't know why. I don't know why every voiceover talent doesn't have a podcast. I mean, really, you've got everything. I know I'm talking to the converted here, but I mean, really, we've got all the equipment. We've always got something to say. Yep. So rock on with your bad self and, get out there. Years ago, I got interviewed by a guy by the name of Steve Tringali. And he said that anybody who has a website has their own broadcast facility. And that's true. And he said that to me probably, 12 years ago. And it's more true now than it ever has been. And, it's beyond me why people aren't doing it. It's huge. It's going to explode. Cars are becoming portable smartphones on wheels. The iTunes icon
Apple
is going to be on
stuff.
It's going to be on your dashboard, So, anyway.
No, podcasting's huge and it's only growing. I don't know if it's a case of now that I started a podcast, I'm paying more attention to it and I'm seeing it, noticing it more places, or that it's just is more places. But like I've noticed commercials for it in the subways here in New York. I've noticed ads I saw one yesterday for Tidal Tidal, which is like Jay-Z's, Spotify kind of music streaming service, now has their own podcast platform. And it's getting bigger and bigger and there's more and more of them out there. So I think it's definitely a good medium to take advantage of for sure.
Yeah. But most people won't.
That's probably true. Maybe over time.
I'm not really worried about saying it because most people won't do it. So anyway,
it's work. It's work and it's a time investment. And it takes a bit to kind of get up and running with it. But I think it can really be a good thing to try out, especially for a voiceover talent, who has the equipment, who has the skill set, who has really everything that a lot of other entry level podcasters probably don't have up front. So yeah,
right.
But so let's talk a little bit about your podcast. I think it's a good segue. So you have a podcast, the Voiceover Marketing Podcast. Give people a little overview about what it is, what kind of stuff you discuss, and the format of the show, and just people who aren't familiar with it, let them know a little bit about it.
Sure. So thank you, first of all. It's the Voiceover Marketing Podcast, and it is what it is, exactly what the title is. It's about growing your voiceover business. And I basically approach the podcast with the mindset of pretty much every business is the same. And I'm not the first, Dan Kennedy and Bill Glazer, who are two marketing geniuses who I've studied a lot and know and have done some work with. They preach every business is the same. And they're constantly fighting but my business is different. And it really isn't. If you think about it, every business needs to attract customers, provide high quality products and services for a fee or exchange of goods and services or money or what have you. Have a satisfied customer and have them referring other people to come and do business with you and have them do business with you again. That's pretty much what every business needs to do. So what I've tried to do is, while I have several people from the voiceover industry and profession as my guests, I've done that strategically, and I can elaborate on that more later. But I've purposefully also had people not in voiceover who are successful people, successful marketers.
Cool. Yeah.
Talk about it, because what you can do with one business, you can apply to voiceover. And so I have them there. The other thing that I focus a lot on, and I'm sorry I'm not being very articulate right now, I'm kind of working without a net, but is that we should be using our talents of voiceover, and if you do production, great, but we should be creating our own products and services, which I've talked about earlier in the podcast, to market and sell, because that way you're creating assets for your business that can generate revenue over and over and over and over again. Whereas if you're doing a voiceover, I learned a long time ago, unless you're syndicated or put out across the country and you're getting the national fees and the residuals and all that kind of stuff, which are nice, but I only have one mouth, And so what I really want to do is leverage my time and create things that can do work for me over and over and over again.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's, I've used this example a lot, that, what are your interests? What are your passions? Aside from voiceover, what are your life experiences? What are you good at? What do you know stuff about? And then find an audience. And create products and services using your talents and then sell them. So like if you're a big butterfly collector, and I always use the butterfly collector. I don't know any. I don't collect butterflies. I do have a beehive, but I don't collect butterflies.
Kind of close. Yeah.
They are pollinators.
Yeah.
At any rate, but if you're a world-renowned butterfly collector, start creating audio products on butterflies and start selling them. You put them on ACX, on Amazon, on whatever, eBay, wherever you want. The world is your oyster. Go create. Yeah. And create assets that build value for your business. That's really the Voiceover Marketing Podcast. We can talk about tactics and strategies and email sequences and all that kind of stuff. But over that, it's like once you've done that and you've got that all in place, you got to kind of lather, rinse, repeat and keep going with it. But where you can create products and services that are going to last you for years, then, you should do it. And then the neat thing is, and that's what I mean about showing up where no one else is, Michael. How many butterfly voiceover specialists do you know?
None.
Right.
Not really.
So you can be the voiceover butterfly specialist or butterfly voiceover specialist and be, sorry, I just hit my mic. You can be like world renowned within that niche of butterfly enthusiasts.
Finding your segment and your target, I think that's huge. Yeah, that is. And growing an audience. And like you said, there's only so many hours in the day. So even if you, had your day wall to wall filled with projects and stuff, if you have these other avenues of stuff that are working for you, on their own, then that, can take things to the next level.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, no, that's great. And let's talk a little bit about that voiceover athlete program, because that sounded interesting. And I don't really know anything about that. Yeah, what is it? Let us know a little bit about it.
Sure. Well, yeah, it's a work in progress.
Okay.
I actually did a webinar. Do you know John Florian and VoiceOver Extra?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I did a webinar with him back in December. And basically it's all about, it's far ranging. You could go on forever, but basically what I'm working on is the voiceover athlete book. I'm in the process of putting something together. And the webinar consisted of a bunch of mobility drills and movements that are designed to help people who sit at a computer and a microphone all day long. Mm-hmm. And, we're developing these postures and all that, and that aren't really healthy. We weren't designed to sit at a computer and click a mouse all day long.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you think of every mouse click as a mini push-up and however many reps you do a day, you're really overstimulating certain parts of your body and understimulating other parts. And so like I said, I had some health issues that were developing 6-7 years ago. And voiceover actually was kind of the vehicle for all of this. It's fascinating how everything comes back to that. I was producing a podcast intro for a guy who was doing kettlebells. And I had heard from other people and a business coach saying, kettlebells, Russian kettlebells are a great way to lose weight. And so I was talking to this guy I was producing the intros for, and he says, oh, you know what you should do? And he was down in Florida. He says, you should Google Russian certified kettlebell trainer in Boston. And I did that, and up came this guy. And anyway, my trainer is Mandla Nkosi. He's been my trainer for the last 5.5 years now. And I went to go train with him to learn how to use kettlebells. And I've always been an active guy. I played soccer growing up. I ran track in high school. I played in a marching band hauling a 25-pound brass saxophone around a football field while blowing into it. So, I was always active. And then, you went to college, you discovered beer and fried food, and then you go work somewhere and sit in a cubicle all day. And then that doesn't work well. And so I wanted to get some of that back. And he basically took me through this whole protocol of mobility, basically wanted to see what I could do. And he said, okay, you're strong, but you can't move very well. And so he didn't let me touch a kettlebell for like 3 months. And we went through this whole mobility protocol to get everything moving again. Because he said, John, we could work all of this stuff, but we would just be piling muscle on top of bad joint function. And then you're going to get hurt. And so what we want, and then we're going to have to undo all of that. So let's get everything moving in the right way, in the right form, and then we can start to load it and move it. And I don't really know where else to take this in this short period of time. It's too much to cover. We've been going 35 minutes already. So at any rate, it's been a fascinating journey. And I thought, you know what? This can be used with voiceover. And I actually have had some coaching clients that I've taken through some of these mobility drills and seen dramatic improvements in the quality of their vocal performance. Everything matters. Everything's connected, the hip bone
absolutely.
connected to the thigh bone. If you have a problem in your foot, it might not just be in your foot. It could be in your hand, And if you've ever hurt your back and you try and make accommodations so that you don't move your backs and you continue to walk around for 2 or 3 days with a bad back, and then all of a sudden your knee starts to hurt, and then the foot starts to hurt because you're loading it differently than you usually do. That's for a reason. Everything's connected. So if we have bad movement and bad movement fluency, that is going to have a direct impact on the quality of our voice, the health of our voice, and our ability for endurance and vocal quality, breath quality, all of that. It's all tied together. Another thing that's really tied together with all of it, and it's something that I've been really focusing a lot lately, is inflammation. The amount of dietary inflammation that people have from refined sugars, refined grains, and vegetable oils and unhealthy fats. If you're inflamed, you're not going to breathe as well. So diet matters. So everything's tied together. And so the idea of the voiceover athlete is that if you use your body to do your work, which we do, then we're an athlete. Same as a basketball, football, tennis, gymnast. We all use our bodies to perform. We can't do our work without it. So we might as well take care of it the best we can. Sorry, I went on my rant. I'm passionate about it.
I agree with all that. Yeah, taking care of yourself, it really does show through and make a difference. Even something as, seemingly simple as just, staying hydrated, getting a good night's sleep, it makes a difference in how you feel, and then that comes through on the mic. Yeah. The same way, like if you do a read and you try it one way, and then you try smiling, as you read. You think like, well, you're just reading into the microphone. How's somebody going to tell if you're smiling or not? You could tell if you listen to it. It comes through. The mic picks that kind of stuff up. It really does.
It does, and the human brain picks it up. We are wired to interpret people. Think of the tens of thousands of years or millions of years of evolution that have gone into being able to pick up cues from other human beings. I mean, have you ever read the book, The Gift of Fear?
I haven't.
Okay, it's a really cool book. It's an older book. I think it might have come out in the 90s, but it's by Gavin de Becker. And I'm not here to trip everybody out on getting scared or anything like that. But one of the things he talks about is our intuition, and it speaks directly to the whole "can you hear a smile" thing. And he said, have you ever been in a car where you're behind somebody and you see the car in front of you and you say, that guy is going to cut me off, or he's going to make a quick turn either left or right into my lane? How many times have we done that?
Yeah.
And sure enough, it happens, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You can't see that person's face. They're ahead of you. They're in a car. You're in a car. Right. You're separated by feet. You're not even talking to this person. and yet you know what they're going to do. So, yeah, you can hear his smile. And, yeah, you can hear when somebody's not feeling good. And, you know, so, yeah, you got to take care of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, that putting it into those in terms of that analogy and that story. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else voiceover related that you have going on that you'd like to talk about before we jump into these audience questions?
I think that, you know, that covers it. That's pretty good. A few morsels for people to chew on, huh?
Okay, cool. Yeah, and links to everything will be in the show notes for you guys. So if you'd like to check out John's website and, you know, his podcast, everything he's got going on, check out the show notes. Links will all be there for you.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, no problem. So let's jump into these audience questions. So our first question is our performance question. And this week it comes from Kenny. And Kenny asks, is the conversational read style a trend or here to stay? Yeah, what are your thoughts on that one, John?
I think it's here to stay, but that doesn't mean it has to stay in its present form.
Okay. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think all things evolve. You know, I mean, the movie trailer voice, to pick a different genre, for an example, you know, before it was the voice of God, it was pretty straightforward read. It was, I mean, it was.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, the real old-fashioned kind of movie trailers.
Star Wars. Go watch the Star Wars trailer. Back in the 70s, watch that and compare it to Star Wars. You know, I mean, it's just.
Yeah.
But
or like the recent Star Wars trailer. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's going to evolve. And I think the conversational style is definitely something that people want, but even that will evolve. So, and you hear it now. I mean, like I said, I got one foot in the door before, you know, the internet, and one foot on the other side of the door post-internet. And it's pretty amazing the amount of language and acronyms that have evolved in the last 20 years. So, you know, even texting. So you're hearing like little things that people put into their text messages in radio copy, like LOL, OMG, I can't believe that I missed that sale at such and such, you know?
Yeah.
You hear that stuff. So it's going to change, but I think it's the conversational thing is going to be around for a good long while, but it will evolve.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's some sort of fad that, you know, a couple months from now, it's going to be like, oh, everything is announcer monster truck kind of reads again. Like, I don't think it's that kind of thing. But yeah, I agree with what you said. I think it might change and evolve over time for sure.
It's an interesting question. I wonder what the motivation behind it was, because, well, I mean, and conversational reading and performance is really what I think is the way we should categorize it. The conversational performance is difficult because you're taking someone else's words and they are writing with a cadence and a style that they're hearing inside their head, and you've got to somehow take that off a piece of paper and make it sound like it's authentic to you. And so it's difficult. So if the question's genesis is to like, can I skip this? No, I don't think you can.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you can't.
I think you need to work on it. So I hope that, take that down a level.
No, totally agree. If that was like the motivation behind it was like, well, you know, this isn't something I do. Do I need to put the time in to learn how to do this? I would say it's probably worth your while to do so. Because, I mean, people want reads that are believable and that sound authentic. And even if the word conversational isn't in the, in the specs, chances are some elements of being conversational, would help your read and would help you come across as a more believable narrator, and as if these words that you're reading are actually your own when they are most likely not. But so Kenny, I think me and John would both agree that it is here to stay, the conversational style, for some time at least. So let's move over to our audio question, which comes from Jen, and Jen asks, what are some good tips or things to keep in mind for mixing music and sound effects with my voiceovers, just in case a client asks for these services? So I know you do some production, John, so why don't you take a stab at this one?
Sure. Well, thanks, Jen, for your question. And, Kenny, thank you, too, for the previous question. I should say that. So a really good tip for mixing music and sound effects with voiceovers is it's a complex question, but generally there's this concept of audio masking, and there's a great book. It's really thick, but it answers a lot of these things. It's from a guy that I studied with. His name is Alex Case, Case, and I think his book is called Sound Effects, and that's sound, the word sound, and then the letters FX. I think I've got that right. If I've got a link to it in my recommended reading list at the Voiceover Marketing Podcast. But one concept that he talked about over and over, and this is back in my learning days of production, is the concept of masking. And you want to avoid music that has a preponderance of sounds in a certain frequency that will compete with the voice of the voiceover talent. So give you an example. We have a midday talent here, and she will voice commercials, and she's got a soprano voice, her speaking voice. Like if she was going to sing, she'd be a soprano. And so the last thing I'm doing is when I pick out a music bed for her is I'm not picking anything with violins or a flute in it or anything like that. It's usually a very rhythmic track with maybe some acoustic guitars, a lot of bass, some rhythm behind it. But I'm not going to have anything that's going to compete directly. I'm not going to have any instrumentation that's going to compete directly with her vocal range. So that's one thing that I would do. And that's the concept of masking. You could get to working on your voice track and getting, the right amount of compression on and EQing and all that kind of stuff and getting nice crisp S's and all that. And then you put a nice, pretty cool music bed underneath it with a lot of splashy cymbals. Well, that cymbal sound is going to wash out all that crispness that you have in your S's and other sibilants and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, man, he knows what he's talking about. Anyhow, so...
No, that's a great tip. Yeah. Music's just the selection of the music in the first place. Yeah, it's a great tip.
So careful when you're picking your music. The other thing that you can do, and what I'll do a lot of, is in my mastering for my voiceover, I'll EQ my voice in a certain frequency range. I'll boost that up a little bit, and that tends to be around 15K with a peak at around 3K, and then it'll drop back down to right around 8. And then I'll do the opposite. I'll put a little drop around the same range in the instrumentation, in the EQ, and that'll really make the vocal pop.
Yeah, that's a great tip. That's kind of my quick and dirty go-to, mix of voiceover with the music thing is it's exactly what you just said. Just boost a frequency range of my own voice that I feel is, nice and present, and then I'll literally just copy that exact EQ over to the music track and just change it from a boost to a cut and just cut, on that exact same frequency. Just so what you're basically doing is just carving out a little space on the music and then, boosting your voiceover in that exact space. So it kind of comes to the front a little bit.
Yeah, I think the preset that I have for that is make room for vocals.
Yeah, I like it. That's a good title.
And but you also want to listen to it. You want to listen to it in a premix because you may find that doing so, it sounds really muddy. The other thing is that you want to, you also don't want the floor to drop out on you. So you have to be careful how much you do it. So you kind of have to play around with it and get to a point where it sounds good. There's the practical knowledge of, okay, if I'm going to use a compression setting, I need to know what the attack and the decay is. But I also need to know, okay, so if I move in this direction, this is generally going to happen. And if I go this way, this is generally going to happen. So you kind of have to have a working knowledge of like knowing what to do to get to the direction that you want to go, if I'm making sense. Because if you don't have that foundation of like, if I do this, then this will happen, then you could be twisting knobs or clicking arrows and all that kind of stuff all day long and driving yourself crazy. The other thing I would do is when you get a mix that you think sounds really, really cool, walk away from it for about 10, 15, 20 minutes. Then come back and listen to it with a fresh set of ears, because we can really fall in love with our creativity and say, oh my God, this sounds awesome. And then you come back and play it the next day and you go, oh, why doesn't it sound as cool as I thought it did?
That's a great tip for honestly, like any sort of creative work, is just to take a step back, give your ears some time to rest, and just give it a fresh listen, whatever it is, a couple hours, a day, whatever. I mean, that's something I try to do all the time if I can.
You got time for one more tip?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as many as you got.
Okay, so here's another one. When you're listening to find out if you've got the right vocal mix with the, so that the voice stands out over the music, turn the volume really down. Bring it way down so that you can barely hear it, and then bring it up. The first thing that you should hear is your voice. You should hear your voice before the music. You have to imagine somebody sitting in a cubicle at work with the radio on at such a level so that they don't get in trouble with their boss for having music on in the office. And that's my frame of reference, is some poor soul sitting in an insurance office processing claims with their favorite radio station trying to win tickets all day long, and they're just got the radio on all day and at a very, 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 very low level, and you want to make sure your voice cuts through. And if the music comes through underneath your voice, that's great, but the music of the commercial can't drown out the message or whatever it is that you're trying to do. So start low and then move up, and you should hear yourself first.
Yeah, absolutely. Something similar to that I'll do sometimes is I'll play it back through headphones, but not wear the headphones. Just put the headphones on the desk in front of me. And if you do that with like a song or something that you're listening to, or even a commercial, chances are you'll hear the voice clearly. I mean, you got to turn the volume up, obviously, to probably a level that you probably wouldn't listen to it at with the headphones on. But when they're off, you can turn the level up a bit, and you should hear that voice cutting through, very clearly over the music, and then. And if that's the case, it should be pretty good.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so that's something I'll try to do, from time to time as well. And those are great tips for you guys for mixing music with voiceovers. And just kind of to reiterate, if you haven't, I'm not sure exactly what Jen's experience was with this kind of stuff, but you should have some sort of working knowledge of EQ and compression if you're going to be messing around with that kind of stuff. To be somebody who has no familiarity with that and is just going to throw those on your mix and start twisting knobs and stuff, maybe you'll get a good result, but chances are, if you don't really know what you're doing, it'll be tough too. So, spend some time just playing around with that stuff, learning a bit about it, I think, before you dive into that.
And it's not that, it looks intimidating, but it's really, you can learn it in like a half a day.
It's not as too crazy.
Yeah. But it's a lifelong of experimentation afterward.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, it's a lot of experimentation, trial and error. That's the best way to learn that kind of stuff, honestly, is moving a knob all the way to one side. All right, what did that do? Move it all the way to the other side. What did that do? And then, just get comfortable with it.
Well, yeah, but what I meant by the experimentation was that it's going to be different for every type of voice and music selection that you make.
Very true.
One size does not fit all. So just because the instrumentation will be different. And anyway. All right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. So on to our business question. Our business question comes from Tom, and Tom says, what are some good tools and software to check out for running a VO business for things like bookkeeping, invoicing, job tracking, etc.? So do you have any go-tos that you like to use in your business?
Hire an accountant.
Okay.
That's where I'm at. I mean, really, it's a good question, Tom. And the reason I say it, I'm not being flip. I use Microsoft Money for bookkeeping and keeping track of my checking account and all that kind of stuff. invoicing. A lot of stuff I'll use PayPal for, just because you can invoice and take credit cards. I'm pretty simple with that stuff. I even have a spreadsheet that I just keep track of all my invoices, and other people talk about, what's that, QuickBooks and Quicken and stuff like that.
QuickBooks and FreshBooks and all. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody else can write a check in my business but me. And I think I have my wife on it in case something terrible happens to me. But I have a corporation. So I also have an accountant do stuff for me. He files all my returns, keeps me legal. I use a payroll service when I'm paying myself, because they do all the reporting for all the withholding and everybody who's got their finger in my pie, so that everybody's happy and they get all the percentages that they need to get from me. So, if I don't like doing that stuff, so I will pay a payroll service to do that for me. It costs me money, or it costs my company money, but for me, the peace of mind, knowing that I'm legal and covered and doing everything that I can to comply with all the, tax laws and regulations and stuff like that, and I have an accountant that does my returns, I just don't, I have all the information that I give to my accountant and the payroll specialist and all that kind of stuff, but then I'm paying them to keep me legal.
Right.
And I'm going on about it, but the reason I'm saying this is that I want to focus on the things that I'm really good at. And I'm really good at voicing, writing, and editing and producing. And that's how I want to spend my time. I don't want to spend a ton of time doing the bookkeeping and invoicing and all that kind of stuff. I hate it. So I pay somebody else to do it. And if you can't do that right away, I understand. But you are spending, I call it the hidden tax, because you've got to spend all this time to comply with stuff. That time is costing you money. It's time that you're not spending doing voiceovers, doing editing, marketing, all those things that you need to do to get money coming in the door. If you're spending all that time on the paperwork, and it costs time. And you've got, I don't want to get on a rant, but I mean, there are all these things that come up, that these forms, when you run in a business and you're doing it the right way, that you're like, oh my God, I got to do this too? And they got this form. It's like, oh yeah, the unemployment insurance. Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad that's taken care of for me. Oh, you mean the unemployment insurance rate is going to change this year? Oh yeah, it does. It changes every year. And it's like,
it's a lot of time. It adds up. Yeah.
There's a lot of it. And if you're doing all that, that's the hidden tax.
Yeah.
That time is costing you money.
Absolutely. And, I think that's the goal, is to get to the point, where obviously what no one else is going to be able to do is record a voiceover with your voice. So just have as much of your time as possible being spent doing that, and have the other tasks that somebody else can do, like your bookkeeping and everything else, pass that on to somebody else and pay them for it. I think the goal is to keep moving yourself closer and closer and closer to that. And obviously at the very beginning, you can't do that, but, taking the steps to get there, I think, is a big thing for sure.
Yeah, I'll make this comment. I think anybody who thinks about raising taxes or putting another burden on a business owner ought to actually have to run a business and comply with all the silly thing. I mean, I'm all for helping people out and giving people a hand when they need it. People run into times. I've been there. We all need help at some point, but it's crazy the amount of stuff that people to comply with everything. That's why people have human resource departments, because they got to spend all this time trying to comply with all of it. It's crazy. And the thing, I won't hire anybody else. It's me. I'm not going to grow my business beyond me, because it's too much. So I've made that decision. But people should, if you like, oh, this is all good stuff. Yeah, it's a nice idea, but see what's on the back end of it. All right. End of soapbox.
No, I agree. It's good points. And I guess to Tom's question, something that I've used for a while, software wise, is Zoho. And Zoho is like a business suite. So I actually do my business email through there. So that's how I have, a custom email address, at michaellengsnervo.com. And I use them for CRM as well, which I think it's important to have a CRM system to keep track of all that stuff. And You can get started with that with Zoho for free. Then I think you have to pay based on how many users, or there's some point, like, they have a free service, and then if you want more features, you have to pay at a point. But I think it's a good place to start for that kind of stuff. But regardless of what software you use, I think the most important thing is just to be diligent about this stuff. Keep track of your invoices and your jobs and everything, and keep track of, everything in your CRM system, and whatever system or software you have, use it. Don't just let it, fall to the wayside. Stay on top of it.
Definitely. Because, Uncle Sam doesn't care if it's just a hobby. If you're making money, they still want their cut. You do not want to mess around with that. I talk about in my podcast a lot. I say, voiceover is a fun business, but it's still a business, and you need to treat it like one.
Absolutely.
And just to piggyback on something you said, if you can, reserve your name as a domain. Get your own domain. Mm-hmm. That should, grab your piece of the cyber real estate and hold on to it, or do something as close as possible. You need to own your name. That's the other thing. That's the business tip too. You want to own that.
And even if you, aren't quite at the point where you've set up your own website and, it's on your list of to-do things, but you haven't gotten there yet, you could still register the domain beforehand. You can, just plant your flag there and grab the domain. And then when you do set up your website, you can, obviously direct it to your website. So if it's something you're serious about, it's definitely a good idea to get a hold of your name. You don't want to have to pay somebody to get your own web address, or, have to use some kind of other web address that's not really ideal for your business or your name. It's definitely a good idea to get on top of that for sure.
Yeah, it's like $9 or something like that, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing too. It's not really expensive. Yeah.
And even if you change from voiceover down the road to butterfly collecting, see what I did?
I got
you still have your domain. You can change the whole layout.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, exactly.
What's
the domain
your scheme?
You have,
Monarch.
You could, whatever you want to do to the website, you could do it, but the domain is there, and you could direct it to whatever site you want. Butterflies, voiceover, whatever you got. Absolutely.
Thanks for playing.
Yeah, no problem. But so before we close things out, is there anything else you want to add about anything, any of our questions, anything you got going on? Just any final words to sum things up?
Yeah, just thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for reaching out to me. I'm honored that you would have me as a guest host on your podcast. It's an honor, and thanks for putting the links. The website's johnmelley.com. That's MELLEY.com. That's my voiceover website. And then there's the voiceovermarketingpodcast.com, and you can get that on iTunes or Stitcher or something else, I guess. And God knows. And then the voiceoverathlete.com is a blog that I've started. I've been a little remiss lately, but I'm in the process of putting that book together, and hopefully we'll have that out in the next few months. And that book's going to have a bunch of videos and demonstrations and stuff like that. So I just got my trademark approved for that.
Nice. And awesome.
Yeah. So now you get the joy of defending it. But no, I'm excited about it. It's a passion of mine. Just thank you. And thanks to all the folks who are listening.
Awesome. Well, no problem. And I'll make it nice and easy for you guys. So links to all that stuff will be in the show notes for you. And just want to say thank you again to John. It's a really fun episode. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right, guys, thank you so much for checking out episode 7. Just to recap, you can get the show notes for this episode at voiceoverroadmap.com/007. There you will find links to all the different things that John and myself were discussing, as well as his website, his voiceover athlete blog, timestamps for the episode, and more information about the things that we discussed. And just a reminder, if you'd like to submit a question for a future episode, you can do that at voiceoverroadmap.com/questions. And if you like the show and can leave a rating or a review on iTunes, that would be great as well. You could also listen to the show on YouTube or on the voiceoverroadmap.com website. So thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next week in episode 8.